Well, hello there. I'm so glad to get to do another devotional with you today. I was kind of thinking about kind of where we're at in our lives right now, and you might be feeling the way I do, which is kind of like we're in this holding pattern. And, we've had all of the 6 weeks has been crazy, and we get through those 6 weeks, and it's kind of like a whirlwind, and you're just trying to find your bearings. But now we're kind of in the stage where we're looking ahead and we're like, oh no, another 4, 5, 6 more weeks before life maybe gets back to normal, or at least starts getting back to some type of normalcy. And, it's kind of one of those spots where you just feel like, oh no, what am I doing? I'm just circling and circling and circling, and there's no change on the horizon. And that's kind of how I feel in some ways right now, and I don't know if you could be feeling that way too. But I was actually kind of thinking about a story in Genesis, and it's a big story that I think really relates to what's going on right now. It's the story of Noah and the ark. And I mean, we know the story where the rains came down, all the earth was flooded, and they're on this ark. But I don't know if we fully grasp how long they were on this ark. And it's a lot longer than what we're facing right now. I mean, they were quarantined on this ark, literally floating on the water for about 370 days, over a year floating around on this ark. And I just think, wow, what a time for them to be going through this. And if there's something that we can learn from them, I think it would be helpful. Because we're going through this time where we're isolated from the rest of the world, and we are kind of in this holding pattern, and we don't know when the end is going to be. And so let me give you a couple things of encouragement. Very first thing I want to bring to you is Genesis chapter 8. We come to verse 1 and we read this. Then God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. So here it is. There is all of a sudden God, he starts to breathe this wind over the earth, and the waters just start to subside. Now, what's crazy is it doesn't just go away like that. I mean, it's not like all of a sudden God blows, the wind starts blowing, and boom, they're able to walk around and get back to life as usual. It's not like that. In fact, we see that there's a series of things that God really starts to do that are there, I think, to give a glimpse of hope for the future. But it doesn't quite solve the issue that they're in right now. Because literally it says that in 150 days later, finally, they're able to see the tops of the mountain. I mean, think about that. 150 days into this thing, and that's when you get your first glimpse of some land ahead that maybe you can rest upon. And so he waits another 40 days after he sees land, and he sends out a raven. And that raven just flies around and flies around and flies around. 7 days later, he sends out a dove, and it just flies around and flies around, no place to land. It comes back to the ark. And then another 7 days, he sends out a dove again, and this time, the dove comes back with an olive branch. And within this, I think we see that there is kind of this testing phase where Noah is just trying to see what God is doing and when the right time will be. And in essence, I think God gives Noah and his family little glimpses of hope that things are going to get back to normal soon enough. Okay, and then 7 more days he sends out another dove, and this time the dove doesn't come back. But it is still another 29 more days before Noah sees more dry ground. And then 56 more days before it says the earth was dry enough for God to say, okay, Noah, now it's time for you and your family to get off this boat. And in total, it's 370 days that they have been in isolation. But listen, this is the part that I really want to encourage you with, that I want to bring hope to, is along the ride here, along this isolation ride, God often brings in little glimpses of hope that he's doing things, that he's preparing us in the world around us for us to re-enter it. And during those times, I don't know what God was doing in Noah and his family, but during those times, God was doing something to prepare for a re-entry into this world. And I think God is doing the same thing here. But I want to give you this in Genesis 8, verses 15 through 17. This is God's mandate when Noah got off the boat. And I want you to hear it. It says, "Then God just spoke to Noah, saying, 'Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you, and bring out every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and cattle, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may abound on the earth. And listen, be fruitful and multiply on the earth.'" Do you get that? See, there is coming a day when God's plan is for us to re-enter the world, and the mandate is going to be the same, that we are fruitful and when we multiply, and that we begin to take and see that this was not wasted time. This was a time of kind of a reset in our lives and in our hearts for God to now move in a new way in our world. And I believe that this is the time that God is doing. So this time we're in, this holding pattern that feels so frustrating at times, is not something that is meant to take away from our lives. It's meant to set us up for the future of what God has for our lives, and also has for his purposes to be fruitful and multiply, to see his gospel go forth in more power, in more effectiveness, in more opportunities of seeing lives changed and transformed by the power of his word. And so during this time of waiting, let's just look for the signs of hope that God has for what he has intended for us when we finally see those doors wide open and we're released and commissioned by God once again to be fruitful and multiply. I hope this encourages you today. God bless.